learning about the Peace Corps service when you're 50 plus, and part of our Global Development Exploration series. And I'm going to stop my share so we can introduce our guest, Anastasia Bainakava, excuse me, who's joining us today. Let me turn off the share, and we've got Anastasia, and then Janine Nguyen is also joining us from the program as well. And Anastasia has served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Ghana, the Ukraine, and Armenia, where she had many adventures. She is currently working as a Peace Corps recruiter. And prior to the Peace Corps, Anastasia worked in a variety of fields, including immigration law, journalism, and the music industry in Boston and Philadelphia. So Anastasia, thank you so much for joining us today. And I will let the two of you take it away.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you for trying to pronounce my last name correctly. I appreciate it. Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to see so many geographic locations. Again, I'm Anastasia. I'm a recruiter for Peace Corps in Arizona. But if you're not from Arizona, that doesn't mean that you can leave because Peace Corps is truly for everyone of any age and all creeds. You just have to be 18, basically. So I am here to present you a little presentation about Peace Corps mission, what we're all about, and stories from volunteers who served when they joined Peace Corps a little later in life. I myself joined Peace Corps when I was in my 30s. So again, it is definitely an opportunity for of a lifetime. When you're ready to serve, you can just go for it. This is a little introduction. Feel free to drop any question in the chat box, and Scott will try to monitor them at the end. So today we'll hear stories, not just from me or Janine Nguyen, who is my good friend from Ukraine. We served in Peace Corps Ukraine together. She's right here in the middle. There are two more ladies who tried to attend, but unfortunately couldn't. And it's Rebecca Stach, who served in Moldova, and Eve Breckenridge, who served in Madagascar. They just shared some of the stories and pictures with me, so I'll do my best to sort of reflect their service as well. And again, this is a little bit about me. I'm a triple offender for Peace Corps. I served in 3 different countries, which you don't really have to do. You can only serve in one, but I so enjoyed it that I decided to continue with my mission. And I was working in agriculture, community development, and youth and development sectors. Those are one of the 6 main projects that you can do with Peace Corps. And while I was there, I learned a handful of languages that I can still sort of kind of speak. Twi and Seshwi in Ghana. I spoke Ukrainian and Russian in Ukraine, and I spoke Armenian and Russian in Armenia. So why choose the Peace Corps? And I think some of you guys I heard may have served in Peace Corps, and I'm sorry you were muted, otherwise I would have asked you to answer this question. But it's a great opportunity. First of all, it's a great adventure. It's a great way to serve and to share your skills and expertise, no matter where you're from, no matter how old you are, etc. It is definitely a lifetime opportunity, and my friend Janine will share it later on. It is something different. It is something that's not like America, or it could be something very similar. You just never know. It's all about the experiences that you will encounter and people you will meet and make friends with. We have a mission. It's very simple. It is to promote world peace and friendship by fulfilling 3 goals below. The first goal is more technical one. It's to provide people of interested countries who invite Peace Corps. We don't just come and do whatever. In meeting the need for trained volunteers. So this is where those sectors come from: agriculture, education, health, etc. And the other 2 goals are more of a cultural exchange goals. Second goal is to promote better understanding of Americans on the part of the people served. And so that means that you are a representative of the United States. You can share your heritage, you can share your culture, you can share your family traditions in order to educate people more about diversity and complexity of America. And then the goal number 3 is to promote better understanding of other peoples and cultures on the part of the Americans. And that's sort of in reverse. When you're finished with your service, or even while you are serving, and you share your pictures, your videos, your stories about holidays and festivals and events you've attended, things you've done, projects you did, food you ate, you know, modes of transportation you've taken, etc., so that your friends and family can actually understand what the culture of that country of service is all about. This is just a little snapshot of our volunteer body up until March 2020, when unfortunately we had to evacuate all of our volunteers from the field due to COVID-19 pandemic. I was one of these volunteers. Janine was also evacuated. But up until that moment, we had over 7,300 volunteers in the field. And as you can see, there's more women than men, and volunteer range in age from 20 to 86. So again, there is no age limit for serving as long as you're 18 years old. So it's a great opportunity. 95% of volunteers, as you can see, have at least an undergraduate degree. However, that's not a requirement. Usually the requirement for volunteer is either bachelor degree in any field or 5 years of applicable professional experience in that field. So that does not mean that you have to have a degree. If you, for example, worked on a farm all of your life, you have great skills and knowledge to be an agriculture volunteer, for example. This is where we have served, and I'm excited to announce that we are actively returning to the countries of service, to the regions. The first batch of volunteers is set to depart in early 2022. Not all the countries and not all the continents, but we again actively towards working that. As I mentioned, I've served in Ghana, Ukraine, and Armenia, and I'm happy to report that Ghana and Armenia are opening. Ukraine is still closed, but we're hoping that it will also reopen. But as you can see, it's basically across the entire world. Africa is a big volunteer generator because there's lots of countries and bigger needs, but that doesn't mean that you can only go to Africa. You can serve in Southeast Asia, the Pacific, Central America, and South America, and also Europe, Central Asia. And as I've already mentioned, these are some of our program area concentrations. The biggest one is education, and volunteers usually teach English or in some countries, math and science. But maybe if you think, oh, what is a typical volunteer, you may think of agriculture or health, and that is also, these are very big sectors. But that doesn't mean that's all you can do. This will be your primary assignment, one of these sectors, but then you can also free to explore your community's needs and do any of the so-called secondary projects. And lots of volunteers enjoy that, sometimes even more than the primary projects. For example, volunteers opened libraries, they had fitness classes, youth groups, health clubs, etc., where they shared their knowledge and expertise, had fun along the way, and also, again, fulfilled the community's needs. A lot of volunteers teach English, even though they may not be education sectors. And some of them enjoy that, some of them do not. So that's just to give you an idea of what you can do as a volunteer. You can definitely use your expertise and knowledge. Some benefits during and after service to kind of show you that it's not just volunteering and being all altruistic, as you may think. We do offer great benefits during service. As you can see, we have living stipends, so you could get your groceries and toiletries and other essentials. There is housing either provided, or again, there is money provided for rent. There's a great and medical and dental coverage. One of the volunteers said that it's the best coverage that she ever gotten in her life, and it's true. And also great vacation time. You accumulate about 1 month of vacation time per year, and you can travel around and take a little time off. And career skills and training is a great benefit as well. During the first 2 months of your service, or it's called pre-service training, You will get training on your sector particularities, as well as great language and cross-cultural knowledge. So a lot of countries do not have any language requirements. So if you're worried that, oh my goodness, I don't speak Spanish or Twi or French, a lot of countries offer the in-country language training. And Janine can talk about it later on a little bit more in depth. Safety and health is the #1 priority for Peace Corps. So we always strive to make sure that our volunteers are safe and healthy in order to fulfill their duties first of all. As you can see, we have medical officers and security officers available at each post who know about any sort of particular natural disasters or any maybe civic unrest that they can be prepared for, and warn volunteers and bring them all in for either a stand fast or eventually an evacuation. This is what happened during COVID-19 pandemic. There's also government support, of course, because Peace Corps is connected with US Embassy at each post, and sometimes they collaborate on projects, as well as, again, emergency circumstances. And there's some additional funds in order for you to kind of ease yourself back into American way of life. If you are all about graduate school studies, there's a wonderful fellowship, Coverdell, to cover either tuition or partial tuition or any other benefits. It depends on the school, but Arizona, ASU and University of Arizona has Coverdell Fellowship, and it's been great and a great way for volunteers to return and to take on more studies. Then there's some public loan forgiveness and federal employment advantages if you're thinking of working again. And finally, there's affordable health insurance during the first 2 months after you finish your service. Okay, well, that was just a little blurb about Peace Corps, and now it's time for Janine to talk. Janine, as I mentioned, served in Ukraine. She even extended her service. She started when she was 69. So again, there is no age limit to join Peace Corps. And so now she will talk about her pictures and her host families and her projects. Take it away, Janine.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to see that we have so many folks here today. It's very nice. I lived for 3 years almost 3 years, in a large village in the Carpathian Mountains in Western Ukraine. And a concern that family had was that they hear about armed conflict in Ukraine. Excuse me. There. And where we were located in the Carpathian Mountains was about as far from the conflict as where I live in Maine is from Jacksonville, Florida. So it did not impact on our lives in any concrete kind of way while I was there, although certainly there were sons and daughters who were serving in the military. So the topic came up oftentimes, but it was not something that any of the volunteers felt in danger. While I was in Kosmach, I could have moved out on my own after 3 months. First 3 months you're living with a host family, and then you can move out on your own. And my family in the lower left-hand corner, that's not everyone, but a portion of the family, were so welcoming, and they really wanted me to stay. And quite honestly, after 50 years of looking after other people, it was nice to be in a situation where people were looking after me. And they were wonderful folks. The older dark-haired woman in the back, Paraska, and her husband, Petro, were my hosts. The oldest woman there is a great-grandmother to the little girl. And behind the little girl is her mom, who is the daughter of my host Paraska. And then there were some other family members. And because I stayed with them, I learned more about Ukrainian cooking than I would have on my own. And I certainly was included in all kinds of events that I would not have had access to otherwise, weddings and funerals and everything in between. And the photo on the upper right-hand side, that's on Easter Sunday at the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And I had gone with my host family. And it's an amazing pageant, really. There is a long mass, and then the standard bearers and the choir and the priest and his helpers circle the church and bless folks who are gathered. And people have also brought Easter baskets, which represent the abundance of this time of year. So the baskets would have eggs and sausage and bread, and always candles, and they'd be covered with beautifully embroidered cloths. And as the priest makes his way around, he is blessing the congregants and blessing the baskets. And he came to our family group and sprinkled us all with holy water. And I'm not Catholic, so this was all new to me. And the thing that the priest has that he's blessing people with is sort of like a cross between a barbecue baster and a fly whisk. If you're familiar with horses, riders used to carry a fly whisk to chase the flies off. Anyway, he came around and he blessed our family group and looked up and realized, noticed who I was, dipped his blessing thing in the holy water again and unloaded all 3 heavily wetted doses of holy water on me. And I never quite figured out whether that was a blessing and welcome, or, oh my goodness, this woman's in a lot of trouble, we got to make sure we save her. But I was so well received in almost all of the village by families, by the extended family of my hosts, the community around me, the neighbors, people that I worked with. And it was a tremendous life experience. I have never been inclined to travel as part of a tour group where you're on buses in a different city every day, but to live in one place for 2 or 3 years and really get to know the people, get to know the way of life, to learn about what has meaning to people in that situation, in that community. It was amazing. And especially so because when Peace Corps first said to me, we're going to send you to Ukraine, my initial response was, well, that's not very exotic. And it wasn't exotic in the way that perhaps Thailand might be, but it certainly was a big step outside of my own life here in Maine. And I loved every minute of it, which is not to say there weren't hard parts, but being there was wonderful. So Anastasia, do you want to go to the next slide? So the whole way of life in the village was so different. I live in the Western Mountains of Maine. And here you don't get the vistas that you do in Coast-Moch. There are a lot of high mountain meadows, old farmsteads and the like that are maintained. And so when you're walking or traveling around, the views are just astounding. And because it's a small community and everyone knew I was the American, I felt quite safe hitchhiking. And occasionally you would have a ride on some very interesting transportation. In the photo on the left here, Vasil Zeus gave me a ride back down into the village from one of the high mountain settlements. And it was delightful. It was wonderful to be moving along at a slower pace and just being able to relax and enjoy the views. And this particular day was an astoundingly wonderful day. The photo with the children, the project that I ended up putting the most time in on, was working with kids around pollution issues, littering. There's no word in the Ukrainian language for litter. And, you know, that's almost part of the problem. If you don't have a word for it, it's hard to address the problem. And the problem of plastic waste is huge. A lot of beverage bottles, a lot of candy wrappers, vodka bottles, cigarette packs. No one, it seems no one gives a second thought to just tossing things. And so we decided to start working with the kids in the hopes that that they would then talk to their parents and their older siblings about things that they learned in our workshops, playing the games that we played. We would take a walk and pick up trash. And we walked about, half a kilometer and picked up 3 bags of trash along the way. We got down to the river and surprisingly, there was no trash to be seen. Usually there's quite a lot. And we talked about that a bit. And I asked the kids, what was the weather yesterday? What happens to the river when it rains hard? What happened to the trash? And they all realized right away that the trash had washed away. The English teacher who was with us, her initial reaction was, oh yes, the trash all washed away, problem solved. And then we talked about where the trash goes. And again, we were back at looking at the issue of how do we be responsible citizens in our village and our country and in the world. And last spring, there were heavy rains in Kosmach and other Ukrainian areas. And countries downstream from Ukraine were furious about the amount of plastic that came washing down. So I think things are going to change. I think things are changing. I'm keeping up with the news from Kosmach. I'm anxious to go back and finish this program. I have 150 t-shirts sitting in my host's attic at this point that we were giving to kids at the conclusion of a day or 2-day workshop. And I am hoping very much to be able to go back to Kosmach with Peace Corps when things open up again. We left 3.5 months. We left because of the evacuation 3.5 months before my service would have been finished, and I might be able to go back for 6 months. And I certainly hope so. And the cow, the decorated cow, is the family cow, and she was a particularly sweet cow. I had met some that weren't. And one of the many cultural differences, people in rural Ukraine don't mow their lawns like we do in the US. And at first, because I've got my American biases, I'm thinking these yards are awfully untidy and such. I was critical of the fact, not out loud, but still questioning, why don't they mow their lawns? Well, it turns out they let it grow up to hay and then mow it either with a hand scythe or more and more with weed whackers, let it dry, rake it up loose, and it gets stored in the barn. And on this particular day, the family cow was kind of helping us out a little bit. So that's very briefly what I took away from Kosmach, the difficulty that I ran into, and Anastasia, is one of the questions about what was difficult? Yeah? Okay, I'll wait.
Yes, we'll get back to that. Yeah, I'll give you a little breather. Thank you, Janine.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I'll be brief with other stories. So this is Eve's photographs. Eve, as I mentioned, served in Madagascar as a health volunteer, and her story is basically kind of mirror Janine's, just not because that Ukraine and Madagascar are similar, but in lots of cases they are. So there was always kids running around and helping her out, as you can see in the picture in the middle. There was this communal help, and also respect for the elders. That was always something that was present in her life. It was easier for her to start projects than for younger volunteers, for example, she said. She made a lot of friends who, again, always tried to help her out, but were always fascinated with the fact that she tried to do everything by herself, and not because that's what Americans do, right? But again, Madagascar was a very communal society, and where elders were respected. And so these ladies in the picture next to Eve, as you can see, are helping her washing dishes and cleaning up after the event, because in their minds, in their eyes, Eve doing everything by herself was just unacceptable. So, and I'm sure Janine can concur. And then a picture on the right, this is sort of a reflection of how much walking and how much sort of different commuting styles that the volunteers would do. This was her path between villages that she would go to teach health classes. And she would walk, or she would see people on bicycles there. And so this is how your commute would look like, maybe in the future, either in Africa or Southeast Asia, or who knows, maybe even Ukraine. There are little paths like that, just with more trees. So she had a lot of fun. And then there is a story that her friend Jenny shared with me when she, I think, broke an ankle and kind of was, again, concerned how she can function and do things around her village with a broken ankle. And again, the Peace Corps came to the rescue. They fixed her ankle, and her village was eagerly awaiting her. So some parallels here. And then the other two slides are from Rebecca's experience in Moldova, which is next to Ukraine. And so they do share some similarities in the culture, cuisine, and even dresses, as you can see. She was also a health volunteer, but her secondary projects included working with youth a lot. And that is, again, something you will be surrounded by either kids or young people who will be fascinated to talk to a real American, as they would say sometimes. They would want to learn English. They would want to hear you speak English. They would want to hear or learn American songs, etc. So they would actually improve English, because it is still one of the critical languages in the world, and a lot of countries are striving to learn English. And so, as you can see, Rebecca's in the middle. She lived with the host family in the town of Tudora, also very, very small town that actually bordered Ukraine. And she lived with the family throughout her entire 2-year assignment. And she said it was wonderful because they let her cook, because a lot of time families would just want to cook for you because you're an honorable guest, and guests do not help around. But Peace Corps also kind of trained them. Peace Corps volunteers become your family members, so you want to do them something to help out, which she did. They also had some farm animals like rabbits and goats, and so she enjoyed feeding them and learned a lot about agriculture. And then the picture on the left, you can see the colorful embroideries on the shirts and tablecloths. And that sort of kind of reflects Ukraine culture. And I think, Janine, you're wearing something from Western Ukraine too that's kind of similar to that. Okay, so again, it's too bad that they're not here. They would have shared their stories in more detail, but we're gonna go to some questions for Janine. And the first one is, what motivated you to join Peace Corps, and what did you do prior to joining?
Um, I have been aware of the Peace Corps since I was in high school. And as soon as I learned about it, I thought it was a fantastic idea, fantastic opportunity. Um, and then life gets in the way. You go to university, you get into a relationship, you end up with children, you wait for the children to grow up, and you got grandchildren. And I just never really put a focus on it. And finally, when I was about 65, I needed to make some changes. I had a small business that was physically taxing. I wanted to close the business and kind of go on to other things. So I was at kind of a what next, what now place, and said to myself, you've always thought Peace Corps was a good idea. If you're going to do it, you need to make a plan and do it. So because I had the business I had to close up, I have my own home, a lot of loose ends, including finding a place for my dog to live for a couple of years. Um, my plan included being in another part of the world when I turned 70. And I had been in Coast March close to a year at that point. So let's see, what motivated me to join was looking for an adventure, looking for another way of experiencing life, looking for a way to celebrate my 70th birthday. And so that all pulled together very, very nicely. And prior to joining Peace Corps, I had worked for over 25 years as the director of the Rape Crisis Center in our county here in Western Maine. And finally, I had reached a point where I needed to stop doing that. And I started a small business. I was painting and wallpapering for about 11 years and just got tired of climbing ladders in other people's houses. And, so I was almost 70. I had a lot more careers and things that I did in the past, but those were the two more immediate and bigger things that I did. So I had experience with training volunteers, running an organization, working with the community, including law enforcement and other social service agencies and such, and also had been working more recently with 4-H. We had a terrific 4-H horse club. I wrote for our local newspaper as a correspondent from my small town. Just, as many Mainers do, did many things simultaneously. And all of those factored into Peace Corps looking at what I had to offer and deciding that I would be a good match as a volunteer.
No, definitely. Thank you so much. As you kind of showing us you're a jack of all trades, and I'm sure folks in the audience will feel the same way, because life experiences, they count, and you can definitely use it as your skill set and service. Okay, well, next. What concerns did you have prior to serving? How did you resolve them? And you kind of touched on that in terms of getting your life together and taking care of, accommodating your pet, selling your house, etc. Could you give us more examples?
Okay. Well, first off, I didn't sell my house. I rented it. Since I came back, I've sold it to my granddaughter, but that's another whole story. But in order to get my house ready to rent, I had some projects I had to finish up. For instance, doing my kitchen was like a 15-year project, and I finally had to, finish it. The dog was a big concern. My granddaughter, who she and I have been very close for years, and I wanted to wait until she turned 20 before I actually left. So in the process of filling out all the application stuff with Peace Corps, they want to know when you're available, and I gave them a date after her 20th birthday. I found someone to take care of my financial issues while I was gone. A young woman I trusted very much, and I paid her $100 a month. Oh, and if you're collecting on Social Security, you can continue to do that while you're in Peace Corps. And in my case, most of it accumulated every month. And what were some of the other? Just reaching a place with my family that they were okay with my joining Peace Corps. The first reaction of family and some friends was, "What? You're gonna do that? Why? Why now?" In fact, my granddaughter said, "Why now?" And I said, "What? I should wait until I'm 80 to join instead of 70?" But they all came around eventually. And I think part of what brought them around, it was them saying to other people, my mother, my grandmother's talking about joining Peace Corps, and other people responding in a positive way. So that all gets resolved little by little. And because I had this 5-year plan, I didn't feel like I was rushed, which was great. So, it's a matter of making a list, and each point on the list figuring out how that's going to work while you're away. And it really is stepping aside from your life as you have known it up till now.
No, definitely. And family consent is very important, no matter what age you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And
how were you perceived in your community? And what challenges and joys have you discovered?
well, for the most part, I was perceived very, very well in the community. The bazaar in Coastmont, we had bazaar one day a week, and walking through the bazaar, I would notice that people very definitely were noticing that I was the American. And as I said, plastic waste is a huge problem. Plastic gets dropped on the ground, nobody bothers picking it up. And I was walking along the main road through the bazaar, and a plastic bag had gotten loose from one of the vegetable fruit vendors, and was laying at the side of the road. And I picked it up and I tucked it into the handhold opening of a banana box. And I just tucked it in and kept walking. And I heard the vendor say to somebody he was talking to something about the American. So I know that I had a reputation for picking up trash. The little girl that I lived with was initially very embarrassed by the fact that I would do that. If we were walking together and I started picking stuff up, she would drop away back. But I wanted to model for people around me good stewardship. And I think eventually that also contributed to the perception of me as a good person and as somebody who really wanted to do something positive for the community. The biggest challenge that I had, and it took over a year to figure out what was going on, I was supposed to be working with the village council, and Coastmont is actually a consolidated community made up of 3 villages and 6 mountain settlements, which meant we had 9 schools. Anyway, the chairman of the village for some reason decided that I was a spy. When I told my granddaughter that, she laughed hysterically and said I couldn't run fast enough to be a spy. But he and the first deputy were sure that I knew how to speak Ukrainian, and I was just faking it that I didn't. And the chairman would hear that somebody saw me walking way up over here one day, and then later I was seen walking over here. I do have a tendency to take pictures of things that tourists generally don't take pictures of. I found the lack of OSHA regulations, the state of the roads and bridges and such to be fascinating. And people were so resourceful in meeting their own needs with all the amenities, without the money to buy the amenities. People were extremely resourceful, and it was fascinating to me to watch people doing things and taking photos. And so obviously I had to be a spy because I was taking all these strange photos. So it was more than a year before I found out that the chairman had this opinion of me. And the difficulty in particular was that he was telling the people I was supposed to be working with, he was telling other employees of the village council not to talk to me, not to waste their time with me. And it was difficult, but we did finally resolve that, and I was able to extend for a third year. And the joys were endless. The long walks I could take with beautiful vistas, being part of everyday life for this family, and the ups and downs and difficulties and such. It's a lot of the families have a cow and they raise pigs and they've got chickens. And so while I was there, there were at least 4 pigs, maybe 5 pigs that were slaughtered. And again, I was taking a lot of photos and helping with preparing the meat for storage. So a lot of it, some of it was frozen, but a lot of it was salted or smoked. No roasts, interestingly. Again, small cultural differences. No roasts, no whole chickens getting broiled or baked or anything. The meat would all be cut up into small pieces that were pan fried for the most part, or in stews or soups. Shortly after I moved in with Paraska and her family, there was a death in the family, and I was included as a member of the family, and Paraska specifically asked me to bring my camera. And so I documented 3 days of funeral preparations and the funeral and the gathering after the funeral. Neighbors, son in a neighbor family got married. I was very, very involved with all of the neighborhood women and the families, cooking vast amounts of food for this wedding, and watching all the other activities that went around the wedding. And this summer, I'm going to go back for a month, if all goes well, for a wedding in the family where I was living. So I'm really looking forward to that. Weddings are a big, big deal. There'll be a week's worth of preparation and a week's worth of recovery afterwards. So one of the joys that I was looking forward to is OLLI-UA, the mother of the little girl in that previous picture, was pregnant when I left, and she was due just a month after we were evacuated. So I was very sorry to have missed that event. And this youngster will be over a year old by the time I get back there.
The people basically brought you joy?
I'm looking at these. Well, maybe we go to the questions when you're done with your questions. You've got one or two more.
Absolutely, yes. I think my questions are complete. Oh, no, there's one more. Any recommendations you have for applicants of your age groups or stage of life?
For me personally, being prepared to go was a huge, huge help. And also having this attitude that I was stepping aside from my own life for this period of time. And the other thing that I would recommend to people that I found very, very helpful for myself is being curious. Going ahead and taking the time to watch people do things. If you have any connection with handwork or cooking or whatever, making connections with people on that basis to show that you're respectful of their way of life, and that you want to learn how they do things. Going with an attitude of Americans do it the right way is a poor way to enter into a community. There is so many little things that surprised me that, oh, is more than one way to do it. For instance, striking a match. We tend to strike them away from us, and in Ukraine, the little matchboxes, and the match was held very differently, and it was struck in the opposite direction with the hand already cupping the flame. And it's like, oh, okay. Laying a spoon or a fork on the table. We always lay them bowl side up. In Ukraine, they're laid bowl side down. And excuse me, we're the baby country. Maybe we're doing it wrong and they're all doing it right. So, the curiosity, I think, was one of the most valuable personal assets that I brought. And the other was being willing to just step outside of my own life. And also be open for whatever happens. There were times, and I was terrible at learning the Ukrainian language. I was getting a ride home one day from the town that's sort of like the county, the capital of the county, getting a ride home to my village with the man who's chairman of the whole county and his driver. And the car pulls over to the side of the road. And the driver gets out and he starts taking my stuff out of the trunk of the car. And, oh, well, I guess we're getting out here. And I get out and the driver sets my stuff down, gets back in the car, and they drive off. And it's, getting to be dusk. It was a pleasant day. It wasn't cold, but I don't know what's happening, but something's going to happen. And about 10 minutes later, the bus came along and I got a ride the rest of the way back to the village. So I learned to not worry about what's going to happen next, because something will happen.
Something good.
Yes. Yeah, generally it was something good.
Awesome.
Generally it was. So I'm looking
Great.
at
Well,
these questions here, Anastasia. And I know,
yes, I cannot see them, but Scott, hopefully you'll help us out. If you can see them and can answer them, we have about
Yes.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
But before you do that, just a brief, quick
Okay.
snapshot of what the application process looks like for Peace Corps. And as you can see, it's multiple step process. And as a recruiter, I can help you out every step of the way. If you are in Arizona, this is my contact information. Also, I think Scott was dropping this link in the chat. This is if you want to get in touch with me directly, you can sign in for any updates. And also, if you are not in Arizona, no worries. There are plenty of recruiters all over the country, and all you have to do is go to peacecorps.gov. This is our official website, and either find type in the search box, connect with a recruiter, or find that little tab. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I could also see some questions. But Janine, if you see these questions, you can answer some of them. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, one of the very first questions that was asked was about reports of women being assaulted while they're volunteers. And I want to say that it's not just women. There have been occasions that men have been assaulted for the purpose of robbery. While I was in Ukraine, a gay Peace Corps volunteer was assaulted, and that it was extremely traumatic for him. And yes, there are occasions that women are assaulted while they are Peace Corps volunteers. And Peace Corps takes it very seriously, and they're learning how to do a good job of responding, and that's ongoing. There is now a worldwide support organization for Peace Corps volunteers called SAVES, which incidentally was the same name as the organization I worked for. So yes, it does happen. I don't know if statistically it happens more frequently than assaults against women and gay people in the US. And Peace Corps is continuing to learn how to respond in a supportive way. So I don't have an awful lot more to say about it than that. The whole issue of interpersonal violence and sexual assault is addressed in the training process, in the 2.5 months of in-country cultural language sector training.
Yes, I can talk more about that a little bit. During the training, the first 2 months of pre-service training, there is training on how to mitigate risks, how to be able to monitor your surroundings, and also language, as Janine mentioned. Language is a big thing to be aware of the situation, understand what's surrounds you, and also use the language in order to help or prevent the situation. Oftentimes, different cultures have different attitudes and different signals, so to speak, even nonverbal ones. And so what cultural facilitators and other Peace Corps staff does, as well as volunteers who used to serve in that country of service, they would give you an insight on how to keep yourself safe.
So I'm going to.
There's a question.
Yes, I'm going to invite some of our folks to ask their questions directly to you. There's a Chris Evans, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question. She's got an interesting one. He or she, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether couples can apply together. I see that it's possible on the website, but I'd like to know, really, does that happen very often? Is it encouraged? What's the experience with that?
Oh, yes, we do accept couples. It is very, very much encouraged. Basically, a couple can serve in the same country of service, even in the same community, but each partner can be in a different sector. So, for example, one can be an agriculture volunteer, another one can be education volunteer, provided that country of service has both of these sectors. And then the post will try to place you where there's need for both of these sectors. But yes, it's I don't know the percentage of couples, but when I served in Ghana, I had 2 couples in my group. And then in Armenia, there was 1 couple in my group. So it's not the majority, but they do exist, and they do, it's actually kind of fun to serve with somebody who is close to you. You get a double allowance. You you actually could be respected in the community faster than single volunteers, and you have someone to complain to every day, you know. So yes, we
And
do
the-
encourage couples.
And the villagers won't be trying to get you married off.
I concur.
Our next question is from Sally Garnett. Sally, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Well, I was just curious, if you stay in a host family, do you pay them rent, or is your stipend lowered a little bit?
Great question. So during the training time, the 2 months, you live with one family in the so-called training community. And at that point, you don't have to worry about the rent or paying for food or anything like that. Usually Peace Corps. And then when you venture off to your service village or town, and it depends on the country of service, you either have an option to live with the host family and pay rent directly to them, as together with maybe some meals, and that will be part of your allowance. But if you choose to kind of rent alone, you will get less money, but it will still be enough to cover for your rent. Does it make sense?
Yep.
And it worked out very, very well. I know that the money was helpful to the family that I was with. And the stipend is perfectly adequate to meet your needs, except for some of the younger people who were in small cities, larger cities, who tended to get together quite frequently with other volunteers and eat out and spend the evening drinking and entertaining themselves. They tended to find the money didn't quite stretch, but for most of us, it was adequate.
Our next question is from Jean-Michel. Jean, if you'd like to, or Jean-Michel, I believe, if you'd like to unmute yourself. It's not coming on. So he basically says, can you describe the research of relevant jobs and recruitment and enrollment process for seniors? Are skills and information technology applicable? And it looks like he did come on, John. I'm sorry, if you have more you'd like to add, go ahead.
No, that was it. You said it very well. Thank you.
Yes, I can answer the general, and then maybe Janine can add into her own experience. So overall, the application process is the same for every applicant, no matter their age or level of education. What we do look for is not only experience, but basically attitude, flexibility, patience, the desire to learn, desire to integrate with the community instead of being a so-called tourist or a foreigner, so to speak. There is some technology portion in your service, because you will need to submit, first of all, you'll need to submit your application documents via portal, so you need to use the email address, etc. And then every quarter, or maybe every 3 months now, I'm not sure, it may change, every volunteer will need to submit their progress report of where they describe their projects that they did, contacts that they've made, number of people attending their events, any cultural events as well, goal 2, goal 3, as you may remember, any cultural exchange, holidays or celebrations, etc. So that will involve some sort of knowledge of technology.
And that question connects to a question that Charlene, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name because I promise I'll butcher it. But you asked about cultural competency and avoiding colonizing ideology during training and during service. And I believe that Peace Corps works hard to screen out people who whose attitudes are, well, we're going to go there and show them how to do it right. And Peace Corps wants this to be a partnership, not having Americans come in and take over. And yet those things do come up some. There was one fella in our group, happened to be in my small language cluster with me, an older guy, not as old as me, but older anyway, thought much older than me. And I was surprised at the times that he would say, well, that's wrong. For instance, what the symbol that is letter P in English is the symbol for the R sound in Ukrainian. And that was one of the times that I heard this fellow say, well, that's wrong. Well, no, it isn't. And we're the baby country, we're the baby language. Maybe they got it right and we're wrong. And he was not able to serve his whole 2 years. He brought that attitude with him and it just wasn't working for him. And he did return to the States early. So I think this avoidance of colonizing is, for most volunteers, sort of part of the screen through which we see our role in Peace Corps. And I think it's a very important one. I think it's one that we all need to be cognizant of, and certainly Peace Corps as an organization is. So.
Anastasia, could you speak a little bit about, you mentioned the sectors, and could you talk about all the different sectors the Peace Corps kind of focuses on, where people might bring their life experience to those different areas?
Of course, but I just kind of want to chime in what Janine was saying. I think the decolonization attitude should start long before the training. Basically, if you bring it with you, there is no amount of training that will basically change you as a person. So again, we do grassroots approach. We help communities that generate the ideas of what community needs. Again, as I mentioned in a slideshow, secondary projects that the volunteers do is a combination of what they love doing, what they know how to do, and what the community wants them to do and community needs. So back to the sectors, again, there's 6 of them. One is education, another one is agriculture, community development, youth and development, environment, and health. And what, again, usually happens is volunteers do not just do work in only that one sector that they select and then they send to help with. I was an agriculture volunteer in Ghana. I was helping farmers with organic farming techniques, but does it mean that I was an expert in farming? No, they were the experts. They lived on that land. They knew how to cultivate the land. They were cocoa farmers. They grew cocoa for export, and I knew nothing about cocoa. So I just left them alone in that. But instead, I focused on kids. I was surrounded by kids. I was drowning in kids. Kids wanted me to speak English to them. Kids wanted to play, do something. And so I did movie nights with them. We did crafts. I also did malaria and HIV prevention talks and activities with the local youth at schools around my village. So basically, I was technically agriculture, but I was also youth and development and health volunteer. So when you get to your community, it actually takes about a year to learn what that community actually may need from you. And this is why it's important just to live there, look around, get to know people, not just the ones who are the loudest, who speak and tell you what they want, what they need, blah, blah, blah. Look at the people in the corner. I was given an advice. Look at the quiet ones. Look at the people who don't have voice, usually women, little kids, marginalized communities, etc. And then you'll figure things out. So again, you can be in this particular sector based on your knowledge and skills, and you can totally use that. I'm not going to say that, oh, if you're an economist or an accountant and you go to this little village somewhere in, Central America, that you will not be able to use the skills. I would think that you will somehow, because people will seek you out and people will try to get help from you. But if you, again, impose your help, impose your knowledge, basically tell people what to do, that is not our approach at all. And I hope I answered your question.
Oh, that was great. We had another question from James that you answered in the chat, but I think others would like to know too. But he says, can you pick your country you serve in? Can you talk about that process?
Yes. So there was a system up until about 5 or 4 years ago where you just apply and sort of throw in all your skills and knowledge in the kitchen sink, and then the Peace Corps determines where to send you. That was for the longest time the system. But Janine, I think you picked Ukraine, no? Or did Ukraine
No,
pick
I did
you?
not. I did
Oh,
not
okay.
pick Ukraine.
Oh, but
Prior to joining
ahead.
the Peace Corps, the most international travel I have ever done was to Canada, which is our next door neighbor here in Western Maine. I had never been off the North American continent. So when I'm filling out all the questionnaires and such, which is all done online, at one point we're asked, where do you want to go? And you can specify one particular place, you can choose several different places, or you can say anywhere, which is what I did, because I hadn't been anywhere. So anywhere you send me is going to be new. And I was fine with that. That was good.
So you, Janine, picked serve where you need it the most or anywhere. And this is an option that you can do. And that's where Peace Corps, again, will determine where to send you based on your skills. And also you can prefer, if you don't like hot climate, you can say, just send me to the coldest country or something, or vice versa. But you can also pick a country of service and also a sector.
And yeah, there is a question, Jean-Michel, I'm sorry for butchering that. My mastery of languages other than English is really poor. The relevant jobs, recruitment, enrollment process for seniors, simply, your life experiences, what you've done. And there's room to put quite a range of information experiences in there. And almost everything that we have done in the process of getting to the age where we are now is relevant to Peace Corps. And it was a little stressful pulling that all out together, because you wonder whether I've done enough, whether I know enough, whether I've got enough that's relevant. And we do, we simply do.
Well, thank you both so much for this. We have a new question that just came in. Neil, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question. Neil, go ahead.
It's Crystal.
Oh, sorry. It says Neil on the screen. Go ahead.
That's my husband. But I wanted to know how fluent you are in the language of your host town.
Anastasia, how did you do in adopting language?
Oh, I wasn't fluent. Okay, but I am a native Russian speaker. So when I was in Ukraine, it was easier for me to serve. But Janine, are you fluent? Are you fluent, Janine?
No. I speak Ukrainian about as well as a 6-month-old baby, and that baby will have much better comprehension than I do. I was not good at learning foreign languages in junior high and high school. And I expected that it was going to be a problem for me. So Peace Corps, in their wisdom, sent me to a country with one of the hardest languages in the world. And the language was a struggle. And there were very few English speakers in the community where I lived. I did have the good fortune of building a really solid friendship with one of the English teachers in the community. And now our telephones can be downloaded with Google Translate and other similar translation programs. Huge, huge, huge help. And it's amazing how much you can communicate with very, very little language. I could manage in the shops, and I could manage with the vendors at the bazaar. And what I find particularly curious is I will think back about a conversation that I had with my host, Paraska, and we both understood what we were talking about with no common language, gestures, and she is the director of the music school in town and tends to be very dramatic, and I do as well. And you know, we'd pantomime, we'd act things out, we'd use Google Translate, and it worked very well. And I think sometimes not being able to speak the language particularly well is a bit of an icebreaker. So it was difficult not being fluent. And at the same time, I was able to get by pretty decently.
And Anastasia, you've posted in the chat, but just for the prosperity of this video and all of that, can you talk about the time commitment? Because we have had a few people ask about that. And then you mentioned a new program or another program for maybe a lesser time commitment. So if you could address those, that would be great.
Absolutely, yes. So the question was, how long is the commitment? And for a regular Peace Corps service, it's 2 years, and you can actually extend your service for another year. That's what Janine did. That's what I did in Ghana. But if you are not ready for 2 years, there is a Peace Corps response, and it is a more short-term projects in a handful of countries, ranging from 3 months to a 12 months period. That is more focused, and they actually need of more professional expertise rather than just a general, I will live in this village for 1 year first and then we'll see. So they actually have more pressing need. And it used to be called Crisis Corps, actually. I was actually in Peace Corps, in Peace Corps response in Ukraine, where I did work with an HIV non-profit organization, because Ukraine has a very high percentage of HIV positive population, unfortunately, including children who are born with HIV. And, you know, there's a big stigma surrounding them. And so we were trying to figure out how to reduce the stigma, reduce the barriers of testing and antiviral medicine, prescriptions and taking. So folks, if you are interested in Peace Corps response, I'm not a Peace Corps response recruiter per se, but I put it in the chat. Just go to the peacecorps.gov and search in the search button response, and you will find more information.
So I was curious today, sort of, what are the biggest challenges the Peace Corps sort of has, and in what ways can people join to help?
You mean the need of the countries, or the actual challenges of the organization?
All of the above.
Yes. Well, right now, the main challenge and the main goal for us is to return back into the field. Again, we are actively returning to a handful of countries, and we're hoping to return more into existing countries and actual new posts. We're opening new posts. I think the main challenge for Peace Corps will be to reinstate themselves in those countries of service, to basically say, hey, we didn't go anywhere. Yeah, we did for a year. And then to kind of reestablish themselves in those communities again. I think that will be the main challenge at this time. But we always need volunteers. We don't just need them for 2022. We need it on an ongoing, rolling basis. And there's basically like certain seasons for certain positions. For example, agriculture, for a handful of countries, agriculture trainees would leave at the beginning of the year, and then teachers would leave in May. That way they're going to be trained throughout the summer and start in the fall. So just keeping the eye and ear on those positions, those volunteer openings, and see what tickles your fancy. So there's always a need for volunteers. And like I said, volunteers are not just there to teach, to facilitate, to train. Volunteers there to talk about America and talk about how diverse America is, what we are as a country, through your family, through your own personal experiences. That is always a challenge, because, you know, the world watches America from afar, and their misconceptions and images of America is what they see, and that's what they think who we are. But we are so much more than that, so much more than just a new snapshot, you know, or the little video. This is why we need volunteers of all ages, again, of all creeds, of all shapes and sizes, to show how diverse and how unique we are. And also, on the other hand, this is why we need volunteers, so they could come back and talk about the countries of service, so Americans would learn how interesting and deep and complicated that the world is. I know it sounds cheap, but it's true. I used to be afraid of Africa. I had, before I learned I was going to Ghana, I was like terrified of going to Africa. I had this negative misconception of Africa. I thought Africa was full of diseases and wars, etc. Right? I come to Ghana, peaceful, happy people just took me in their arms and fed me all the time, you know, danced along, and just, I loved it. It was such a, you know, life, earth-shattering experience that I always will have with me now. So.
We actually just had a question come in too while we were talking about the Peace Corps. Is it open to Canadians or other folks?
If you are a US citizen, you can do it. So you can be Canadian, but you have to be US citizen as well. Yeah.
Okay, so you do have to be US. Go ahead.
One of the things that surprised me greatly about the Peace Corps was how many volunteers were not born in the US. They're like Anastasia. There were many others who were born in Ghana, the Czech Republic, Asian countries. I was really astounded by that, and it made for a big shift in my thinking about who the people are who emigrated to the US as children or as young adults. Surprised the heck out of me.
I'm kind of curious with the impact of COVID, if, you know, much like we are sitting here today, a year ago, we would have not been doing our program like this and had this incredible technology and ability to bring people together in different ways. Has Peace Corps discovered any interesting ways during COVID to sort of stay connected or figure out a way through this crazy world we've been living in?
Yes, we actually had several online pilot programs for volunteers who were evacuated and who wanted to return virtually to the countries of service. That includes Armenia, where I also served. It was a program where volunteers would log in and do training sessions for organizations that also expressed interest in learning while in Armenia. And so that was fortunately possible through Zoom. And yes, it was a little different than actually going to the country of service and living there, but this is what volunteers wanted to do. Yeah.
That's great. That's wonderful. Well, we thank you both so much for joining us today, and we've had some great input from all of our friends in the OLLI audience, and want to thank our members from around the Osher network and our guests today for joining us, and hope that you all learned about this. We'll be sending her contact information along in an email after this as well for those who attended, and those that couldn't attend will get a copy of this video as well. But thank you all so much. This is the hardest part of a webinar, is you don't get to hear the applause and all the thanks. But your effort, yeah, your effort was is greatly appreciated, and we thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Well, thank you for
It's
the
our pleasure.
opportunity. It was fun.
Well, everybody
Thank
have a great week out there at OLLI, and we'll see you for our next speaker series in 2 weeks. So enjoy your week. Take care, everybody, and be safe and be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, Anastasia.